ma'am, I can call somebody. A wrecker, the county, anybody, you just say the word. The old man on the stool didn't answer right off. He was soaked clean through, shaking hard enough to rattle the cold coffee can on the bench beside him. One boot planted wrong, like the ankle underneath it had quit on him sometime back in another decade. Out past him, in the gravel, sat a motorcycle older than the woman kneeling next to it, dead as a dropped stone, glazed over in a thin skin of ice that caught the shop light and threw it back at her. "Got nobody to call, miss," he said finally. "And I've got to be standing on a ridge in Virginia by first light, or I break my word to a man who's been in the ground 11 months. So unless you've got a way to raise the dead, I don't reckon a telephone's going to do me a bit of good tonight." The dear Yvonne, Adi, to the 3 people left in this world who loved her, looked past his shoulder, through the open bay door, out at the paper the county had stapled to the post by the road 3 weeks back. TAX, Sally. 45 days. She'd read it so many times the words had quit meaning anything and started meaning everything. She looked back at the old man. Then she shoved her sleeves up past the elbow. "Well," she said, "you push that thing to the one shop in this county that won't laugh at it. Let's get you out of the weather." 3 mornings after that night, there would be a quarter-mile of headlights frozen along Route 9 outside her daddy's shop. 200 engines breathing steam into the dark before dawn, and not one living soul in Briar Gap, West Virginia, would be ready for who that wet, busted-up old man turned out to be. But I'm running ahead of the story. Let me carry you back to the front of that week, because you can't understand what those 200 riders came to do unless you first understand the woman they came to do it for. Briar Gap sits in a fold of the mountains where the cell signal dies and the radio comes in 1 station strong. Population a little over 2,000, falling every year. 1 blinking light at the 4-way, that Dollar General, a Baptist church, a Methodist church that share a parking lot and a quiet grudge, and 1 independent garage on Route 9 that had been losing money for going on 2 years straight. Vaughn Diesel and Auto. The sign was cut and welded by hand by Marcus Vaughn in 1991, and the V had a little star punched through it, because Marcus had been a cavalry mechanic and never quite got the army out of his blood. Addie's alarm went off at 5:15 every morning, same as it had since she'd come home. She'd swing her feet onto the cold floor, pull on whatever was closest, and pad down the hall to start the coffee for her mother. Della Vaughn was 66, and her knees were going. And she pretended every single morning that she hadn't heard her daughter get up, and Addie pretended every single morning that she'd just happened to make a pot for 2. That was the arrangement. That was how they said "I love you" in that house without ever having to spend the words. Then she'd crack the door to the little room at the end and check on Dion. Dion was 8. He had Addie's sister's eyes, and her quick temper, and her habit of sleeping flung sideways across the whole bed like he'd fallen out of the sky. His mama, Addie's baby sister, Renelle, had passed 2 winters back, and his daddy had never been anything but a name on a form. So now there was Addie, 29 years old, 4 years in the army behind her, a combat engineer's hands and a combat engineer's nerves, and an 8-year-old boy who called her Auntie Addie and clung to her like she was the last solid thing in a flood. She had not planned on any of this. I'll be straight with you. There was a version of Addie Vaughn that, by 29, was supposed to be 300 miles south of Briar Gap with an engineering degree halfway finished. She'd had the slot. After she mustered out, she'd applied to the mechanical engineering program at the State University on a veteran's scholarship, and she'd gotten in clean. There was an envelope in her dresser drawer that said so, and a second letter behind it, newer with 1 line on it that put a cold stone in her gut every time she read it. Final deferment expires 45 days from the date of this notice. She deferred it 3 times now, first for Renelle's funeral, then for Dayon, then because her father's shop was 45 days from being sold off the courthouse steps, and she could not, would not, let the last thing her daddy built in this world go to some man in a suit with a paddle in his hand. So she stayed. And every night. And this part not even Della knew. Addie took the old rollback tow truck out under a magnetic light she stuck on the door and ran wrecks and breakdowns for cash. 11 at night to 2 in the morning, 3 or 4 nights a week, $40 a tow, No receipts. She'd slip half of it into her mother's church envelope on Sundays and let Della believe it came from the shop. The other half went into a coffee tin behind the loose board in the bay, the one her father had used for the exact same purpose, climbing toward a number she was never going to reach in time. 22,000 for the school. A little under that again for the taxes. You can do the arithmetic faster than she could pretend not to. Every Sunday morning before church, she still wiped down her father's workbench. 6 years he'd been gone. A logging truck on the wet grade out by Sutton. No fault of his own. And she'd never moved a thing on that bench. His chipped mug. The half-rebuilt fuel pump still soft-clamped in the vise. And propped in the corner, a wall calendar from a company called Ridgeback Cycle Works. The year on it long past, the pages gone soft as cloth from handling. When Addie was little, she'd asked him once why he kept that ratty old calendar up when the year was wrong. He grinned and said, "Baby girl, I don't ever throw out a thing that reminds me somebody was good to me once." She hadn't understood it then. Standing in that shop at 29, she still didn't. But she dusted it anyway. Because he had. Her old squad mechanic, Quincy Adair, called from Texas most every Sunday night. Quincy ran a fleet shop outside Houston now, and he'd been trying for a year to pull her down there. The conversation never changed. "Bon, I got a lead tech slot open. 6 figures. Benefits, the whole 9. Say the word and it's yours." "Next year, Q." "You said next year last year." "I know it. Rennell wouldn't want you nailed to that mountain." "I know it." And that was about where it always ended, because what Quincy, down in his nice climate-controlled bay, couldn't see was the boy down the hall and the woman with the bad knees and the sign with the star punched through the V. Addie wasn't going anywhere until that shop was safe, even if it cost her the only future she'd ever picked out for herself. Now. That Thursday, the weatherman kept cutting in over the one good radio station to warn about an ice event coming up out of the south. Freezing rain, then a hard freeze behind it, roads glazing over by midnight, crews already pre-treating, the county telling folks to get where they were going before dark, and then stay put. Addie barely listened. She'd run a wrecker through worse. What she didn't know, what she had no way to know, was that the ice rolling up the valley that night had a stranger riding ahead of it. And that stranger was carrying the whole rest of Addie Vaughn's life strapped to the back of a dead motorcycle. It started around 9:30. She heard the bike before she saw it, and what she heard made her set down her wrench. A long, wet, knocking cough, the kind of sound that tells anybody raised around engines that something deep inside has already let go. She stepped out under the bay door, and there he came, a leather-clad shape on the shoulder of Route 9, pushing a motorcycle through the first stinging needles of freezing rain, dragging that bad leg, one fist on the bars, and the other pressed flat to his hip like he was holding himself together by hand. The bike was a beautiful thing, even half a field away. A vintage cruiser, all chrome and hand pinstriping, the kind of machine that lives behind a velvet rope now, and it was stone dead. "Sir, hold up, let me get that." She jogged out into it. The rain was already turning to glass on her shoulders. He looked up at her. Weathered face, a gray beard frozen at the tips, eyes a pale washed-out blue that had clearly looked at more than their share of bad days. 70, maybe. "Much obliged," he managed. They walked it together into the dry of the bay, and the second the kickstand dropped, he folded onto the stool like a building coming down. His leg jumped and shook. His breath came in ragged saws. Della appeared in the kitchen doorway in her housecoat, took one long look at the leather, the patches, the worn smooth toughness of him, and went still as a fence post. "It's all right, Mama," Addie said low. "Go on and warm up." The old man got himself standing again, slow with effort, and pulled the soaked cap off his head and held it in both hands like a man at a graveside. "Ma'am, my name's Gus. I am truly sorry to come busting into your home at this hour. I'd not have asked it of you unless I was out of road." Della's shoulders came down half an inch. "Manners don't cost a man a thing, but they sure do tell you who he is. Sit down before you fall down, Mr. Gus," she said. "I'll put the kettle on." He talked while Addie went down on her knees by the engine. 3 days he'd been riding, solo, up out of the Carolinas. The bike had run hot near Bluefield, started missing south of the Gap, and he'd limped it into the big chain shop 12 miles back, Apex Auto, the bright new place with the national coupons that had buried 3 family garages in the county already. A kid behind the counter had taken one look at the old machine and laughed in his face. "We don't touch antiques, Pops. Try the next county." So Gus had pushed it the rest of the way, a mile and a half through the freezing dark, until he saw a light still burning at Von Diesel and Auto. "I've got to be at Sentinel Ridge by sunup," he said, 180 miles north, "or I break a promise I made over a man's grave." Eddie looked up. "What kind of promise sends a man out in this?" The old fellow went quiet, stared at his boots a while. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to the floor. "Had a brother. Not by blood. Better than blood. We served together a long time ago, and we made a pact. Young, the kind of foolish thing young men say and then spend their whole lives keeping. Whichever of us went first, the other one rides to that ridge on the anniversary. Stands there at first light. 2 minutes of quiet. Then he rides home." He swallowed. "I have made that ride every year for 11 years. I do not aim to be the reason it stops." The rain hammered the tin roof loud enough to lean on. Addie looked at the bike, then at her mother in the doorway, then back at the old man's shaking leg. She slid under the machine with a drop light and started running it down. 2 minutes later, she came back out, and her mouth was a flat hard line. "All right, I'm going to give it to you straight, because you strike me as a man who'd rather have it that way." She wiped her hands. "Your ignition coil's cooked. You've got a head gasket that's let go. There's a hairline crack run up your cylinder sleeve, and your carb's gummed so bad I can smell the varnish from here." His face came apart by degrees. "Can you fix it?" "The parts you need don't exist within 80 miles of this stoplight. Not for this. Every shop that even have a prayer is closed and iced in. The county's shutting the roads behind you as we speak. If I ordered tonight, you'd see those parts Monday at the earliest." The old man's eyes drifted off to somewhere a long way away. His mouth worked, but nothing came out of it. Then his hand went into his vest, and it came back with a roll of bills, and he held it out to her, shaking. "Miss, I'm not asking you for charity. I'll pay what it's worth, or I'll pay what I've got, whichever runs out first. I'm asking you. Please, don't let me be the one who let him down." Addie looked at the cash, then at his face, and the old man's eyes had gone wet. The careful kind of wet a hard man spends his whole life learning to hide. And right there, plain as if he were standing at her shoulder in his coveralls, she heard her daddy. "A stranger broke down on the side of the road ain't a customer, baby. He's just a neighbor who hasn't met you yet." Outside, the ice came down in a sheet. "Put your money away, sir." She stood and rolled her sleeves the rest of the way up. "Mama, put on a full pot, would you? It's going to be a long night." The old biker covered his whole face with both hands and made a sound I will not try to describe to you, except to say it was the sound of a man finally setting down something he'd been carrying alone for 180 miles. The next 11 hours, Addie would tell her mother later, were the closest she'd felt to her father since they put him in the ground, like he was standing right behind her with his hand on her shoulder, talking her through it. She cracked the engine and laid every part out across the bench in the exact order Marcus Vaughn had drilled into her before she was tall enough to see over it. Every bolt, every washer, lined up like soldiers. Della carried out towels, then coffee, then more towels. Gus sat the whole while on the stool in the corner, with his cap in his lap, and didn't blink. At 11:15, the power flickered. By 11:30, it was gone for good, the whole valley dark. Gus started to get up. Addie waved him back down without turning around. She lit the kerosene lantern off the wall hook and pulled her father's old battery work light from its corner. The same dented, scratched-up thing James, Marcus, had clamped to engine stands for 20 years, and the bay went gold. Then she went to work on a problem that didn't have a store-bought answer. "What you can't buy," her daddy used to say, "you make." She dug under the bench and hauled out a cardboard box she hadn't opened in years. Scrap. Cast-offs. parts her father had refused to throw away because he could not stand to waste a thing that still had iron in it. She found a chunk off an old junk engine block and set it up on the lathe, and she turned a sleeve by hand under lantern light, slow, 1,000th at a time, sweat running off her chin and freezing nowhere because the bay had gone so cold she could see her own breath. She pulled a coil off a dead riding mower out back and bench tested it till the needle jumped clean. And when there was no gasket to be had, on this side of the mountains at midnight, she cut one out of a sheet of soft copper she'd been saving for nothing in particular, scored it and snipped it and heated it, cherry red with a torch, and dropped it hissing into a bucket of cold water, and trimmed it down by feel, the way her father had taught her with his hands over hers. Somewhere past midnight, Gus spoke from the corner. "How old is she, ma'am?" 29, Della said. "How long's she run this shop?" "Since the day her daddy passed. 6 years come summer." "Did 4 years in the army before that?" "Combat engineer. Took apart bombs for her country and came home to take apart this town's trucks for free, half the time." Gus was quiet a long while after that. Then Addie heard the scratch of a pencil. She glanced back, and the old man had a little worn pocket notebook out, and was writing something down in slow, careful letters, and then he closed it and put it away and never said a word about it. At 10 of 2 in the morning she bled the lines, set the timing by ear, and stood up. Her shirt was soaked through. Her arms had a tremble in them she couldn't stop. "You want to do the honors, sir?" Gus limped over and eased a leg across the saddle. He shut his eyes for one long second. Then he hit it. Click. Nothing. His jaw went hard. Again. Click. Cough. Sputter. Quit. The ice on the roof was suddenly the loudest thing in the world. Della came to the doorway with a coffee pot in both hands and her lips moving without sound. Addie's own hands were shaking now, not from the cold, from hope, which is a worse shake than cold ever was. She reached down and turned one screw a quarter of a turn. One more time. The old man hit the starter, and the engine caught and roared, not coughing, not crawling, but full and round and alive, shaking the whole bay, sounding for all the world like the year was built. Gus bowed his head down over the bars, and his shoulders went hard, and he didn't make a sound, but the tears ran straight down off his beard and beaded on the chrome. "She'll carry you the 180, Addie said when she could trust her voice, "and then some. Get a real sleeve in her inside 1,000 miles." Gus looked up, red-eyed and rough. "Young lady, you just brought a dead machine back to life with a lawnmower part and a chunk of scrap by lantern light in an ice storm in under 5 hours." He shook his head slow. "That's not a trade. That's a gift." She looked at the floor. She'd never once known what to do with praise. "It's what my daddy taught me. That's all it is." He stared at her a long, long beat. "Then your daddy," he said quietly, "was one hell of a man." Now hold on. Let me stop the tape right here, because this is the part I want you to really sit in. This woman is 29. Her shop sells out from under her in 45 days. Her schooling lapses in 45 days. There's an 8-year-old boy asleep down the hall who has nobody else in the wide world. And there's a fold of cash sitting in a stranger's open hand, and she is about to push it away like it's nothing at all. You can tell exactly who a person is by what they do when somebody offers them more than they expected. Gus was about to find out precisely who Addie Vaughn was. He reached into his vest one more time, and this time, what came out wasn't a wet little roll. It was a thick bank-banded stack. Hundreds. The kind of money a broke-down old biker has no business carrying. Addie clocked it and said nothing. "How much? For the work?" $20. Scrap was already mine to give. Time's just time. Gus laughed, one short bark. 20. He counted off 5 crisp hundreds and pressed them flat into her palm and closed her fingers over them. "Take it, for the work, for all of it." Addie's hand stayed shut around that money a beat longer than it should have. And I'm going to be honest with you, because she'd want me to be, and because I think you'd see right through it if I weren't. She wanted it. God, she wanted it. God, she wanted it. $500 was Dion's inhaler that she'd been splitting in half. 500 was 2 months of the light bill. It was a real dent in a real number, and it was sitting warm in her own hand. And the man was begging her to keep it. For one whole second, she did the math, and the math said, "Take it." Then she heard her father again. Not from any memory this time, from somewhere down underneath one. "The day you start charging folks for being decent, baby girl, you'll have priced yourself clean out of being a good person. And there's no buying that back." She opened her hand and folded his fingers right back around the stack. 20, she said, "and the coffee my mother made you, that's the honest number, sir." In the doorway, Delavon didn't say a word, but Addie felt her mother love her for it from clear across the room. Gus held still. Then he peeled 120 off the roll and laid it on the bench. "What's your name, young lady?" "Adira Vaughn. Folks call me Addie." "And your daddy, what was his name?" "Marcus," she swallowed. "Marcus Vaughn." Something went across the old man's face fast, a flinch almost, like he touched a live wire. He looked away from her. Then he got out that little notebook again and wrote the name down and underlined it and shut the book without one word of explanation. He reached up and unpinned a small enamel patch off the chest of his cut, a star set over an anvil, 2 letters worked into the metal, and pinned it to the strap of her coveralls with his own hands. "You hang on to that. It means a great deal where I'm from." He set a plain card on the bench. No name, just that same star and anvil and a phone number written by hand. "Anything you ever need, you call that. You say your name, and you wait. You understand me?" "Yes, sir." He swung a leg over the bike, and it fired clean on the first touch this time. "What you did tonight, Addie Vaughn, will not be forgotten." The headlight cut on, and he rolled out into the gray edge of dawn, the storm finally breaking up behind him. Addie and her mother stood in the doorway and watched him go until the taillight was gone. And that would have been the whole of it. A good deed in a bad storm, the kind that warms you for a day and then fades, except that when Addie turned to go back inside, her boot caught on something tucked half under the bench. A canvas saddlebag. Heavy. Worn soft at the corners. Gus had left it behind. She carried it to the kitchen table. The buckle gave easy. Inside was a folded road map with a spot up in Virginia ringed in red ink, a small Bible gone limp from handling, and one laminated photograph. She slid the photo out slow. A campfire. A couple dozen riders ranged around it, and dead center, 2 younger men with their arms slung over each other's shoulders, and one of them, dark-haired and grinning, was unmistakably a younger Gus. It was the patches on their cuts that stopped her breath cold, the same star over the same anvil, and under the lining of that bag when she ran her thumb across it, a faded sticker, "Property OFGR, National." She wasn't about to chase 180 miles of iced-over road after him, but she could keep her word the way he'd kept his. So she picked up that plain little card, and she dialed the handwritten number, and a man answered on the second ring, like he'd been sitting on the phone. And Addie said, "Sir, you don't know me, but an old fella named Gus left his bag at my shop in Briar Gap tonight, and I'd surely hate for him to be without it." There was a silence on the line that went on a beat too long. "Ma'am," the voice said carefully, "would you say your name for me again?" "Adira Vaughn." Another silence. "Don't you move that bag, and don't you go anywhere." And the line went dead. She didn't sleep right for the next 2 days. Friday afternoon, she opened her cracked old laptop in the corner of the bay and typed Star Anvil Motorcycle Company into the search bar. And the first result loaded, and Addie Vaughn whispered "no" to an empty shop. Ridgeback Cycle Works, founded 1979. The largest independent American custom motorcycle builder outside the big factory. Revenue up in the 9 figures. Founder and chairman, Augustus "Gus" Renner. And below that, a second line that put the cold stone right back in her gut. President Emeritus, Steel Valor Riders, the National Veterans Motorcycle Brotherhood. She clicked the photos. Old ones mostly, but one was new. A charity dinner, a tux, that gray beard, those pale blue eyes, that same bad leg. And there, propped in the corner of her father's preserved bench not 3 feet from her elbow, was a soft and yellowed wall calendar from Ridgeback Cycle Works. The one Marcus kept out of all the calendars in the world. I don't ever throw out a thing that reminds me somebody was good to me once. She didn't tell her mother. She was scared to be wrong. She was a good deal more scared to be right. That same afternoon, a black SUV crunched into the lot, and Royce Tillman got out smiling. Tillman bought tax liens for a living, and he'd been circling the Vaughn place like weather. 45 days, Della, he called up to the porch, all teeth. Storm tore up your roof, I see. I'm dropping my number. 31 cash, today, before the courthouse does it for less. Della met him at the screen. Get off my porch, Royce. He smiled like a man with time, because he had it. You'll feel different by next week. From the bay, Addie's knuckles went bone white on the wrench. Saturday, she laid it all out on the kitchen table, the photo, the sticker, the laptop screen. Della sat down slow and didn't speak for a long while, and then she shook her head. Baby, don't go building castles on a stranger. After your daddy, after your sister, I spent 2 years letting people lift my hopes up just to drop 'em. I don't expect anything from anybody anymore, and it's kept me standing. Addie nodded and put it all away. But that night, lying in the dark, she ran it back. The catalog on the bench, the Brotherhood, the way he wrote her daddy's name down twice and underlined it, will not be forgotten. Sunday morning, 20 after 4, she woke to a low rumble in the floorboards like far-off thunder. But there wasn't any storm. The rumble got louder. Across the hall, she heard her mother sit up. Addie? She was already at the window. She thought it was a freight train. But the sound wasn't sliding past. It was coming, up Route 9. Headlights poured out of the dark. Not 3, not 30. And Addie understood, standing barefoot at the glass, exactly what was rolling up that mountain road before sunrise. And it was here for her. 200 of them filled the gravel lot, the back pasture, both shoulders of Route 9 for half a mile in either direction. The dawn mist curled up around 200 engines, and then, all at once, they cut, and the silence that dropped down was so total it rang. 3 slow, heavy knocks on the front door. Della grabbed Marcus's old shotgun off the rack, didn't raise it, just held it the way mountain grandmothers hold things. They pray to God they'll never need. Addie opened the door. Gus Renner stood on the porch, cleaned up, beard trimmed, cut crisp and clean. Behind him, 200 riders stood in formation, caps off, hands folded, still as a stand of timber. Mrs. Vaughn. He took off his sunglasses. May we come in? There's a debt I mean to settle this morning, and it's owed to you and your girl, both. Della lowered the shotgun an inch, then all the way. She stepped aside. Gus stood in that little kitchen with the faded curtains and the chipped table and turned his cap in his hands. Ma'am, I'm going to tell you something. I've told exactly one room full of people in 12 years, and I told them yesterday, standing on Sentinel Ridge. He drew a breath. 14 years ago, I was riding cross-country alone, and threw a rod outside a nothing town in this state. Middle of August, heat like a furnace. I sat on that shoulder and I watched truck after truck go by. Nobody stopped. Then a man pulled over in a work truck with a little girl riding shotgun. Couldn't have been more than 6. Then that man got down in the gravel in that heat and worked on my engine for the better part of 4 hours, with his little girl handing him tools one at a time. And when it was running, he would not take $1 from me. Not one. Said his daddy taught him a broke-down stranger isn't a job. He's a neighbor you haven't met yet. Della's hand had gone to her chest. I asked his name. Gus's voice had gone rough as gravel. He told me, Marcus Vaughn, of Briar Gap. Addie's knees nearly went out from under her. I tried to find Marcus the next year. I had something I wanted to put in his hands. But he'd changed jobs, and life got loud, and I let it slide. God forgive me. I let it slide. And then I heard, some years on, through a rider down in this part of the country, that Marcus Vaughn had been killed on a logging grade. The old man's chin trembled. I have carried that debt 14 years, ma'am, and then Thursday night, in an ice storm, His daughter brought my engine back from the dead. Same hands, same words out of her mouth. Wouldn't take my money. He looked at Addie, and his eyes were streaming now, and he made no move to stop them. I knew, ma'am, before you ever said his name, the second she folded that cash back into my hand, I knew whose girl she was. Your husband sent me his daughter, 14 years late, and exactly on time. Della broke. Both hands flew up over her mouth, and the tears came in long, silent waves that shook her whole frame. Marcus, she said. Oh, Marcus. Gus turned to the man mountain beside him, who set a leather portfolio down on the table, soft as something holy, and the old man started laying out pages. The first was the deed to the house and the shop, free and clear. The Steel Valor Foundation had paid the back taxes, the note, all of it, a little over $210,000, closed out Friday morning. For the first time in 20 years, the place was hers. The second was a build proposal. The foundation would fully fund tearing down and raising up the old shop into a training garage, diesel, restoration, the trades that would carry her father's name and take in rural kids and veterans. Nobody else would gamble on. Marcus's bench, his mug, that soft old Ridgeback calendar would all stay, set under glass at the front door as the heart of the place. The third he slid across to Addie. Her university deferment, the one that lapsed in 45 days, had been canceled and replaced. A full ride, mechanical engineering, every dollar, 4 years, plus a paid apprenticeship every summer at Ridgeback's own shop, learning from the same builders who'd put Gus in business back in '79. The fourth was a trust, $1 million in starting principal endowed in perpetuity, called the Marcus and Adira Vaughn Trade Trust, to find black kids and veterans in forgotten little towns who wanted to build things with their hands and give them the shot nobody had given them. Addie would hold a seat on the board the day she turned 30. And the last thing out of that portfolio was a small black frame, set on the table gentle as a sleeping child. Behind the glass, on black felt, a single patch in heavy gold thread. Stud, the watch. This one, Gus said, and his voice had gone down to almost nothing. The Brotherhood gives maybe twice in a decade. Sometimes not that. It goes to a soul outside our colors who kept a brother's honor when there was nobody watching to make them. He looked at her. You kept mine in an ice storm at 2 in the morning when you could have just taken the money and nobody on this earth would have blamed you. That patch means you ride safe on any road we hold the rest of your life, and it makes you, at 29, the first woman ever to wear one. He stood, and he pinned it to her shirt with his own 2 hands, and he laid that hand on her shoulder. Your family now, wherever you go the rest of your days. Family. Della tried, one last time, the way good proud people do. Mr. Renner, this is too much. We can't. Ma'am. He turned and faced her square. Your husband paid this forward 14 years ago. Your daughter paid it forward Thursday night. The interest is ours to carry, and we've been waiting a long time to pay it. Don't you dishonor 200 men standing in your yard by telling them no? Della shut her eyes and nodded. Gus walked out onto the porch and called across that frozen lot in a voice that carried half a mile. Brothers, caps off for Marcus Vaughn. And 200 riders bared their heads in absolute silence as the sun finally cracked the ridgeline behind them, and one of them lifted a camera and caught a single frame. A black woman in a white shirt with a gold patch on her chest, her gray-haired mother folded into her arms, 200 bikers bowed behind her, and that photograph was on the front page of 3 national papers inside 2 days. Royce Tillman quietly withdrew his offers and moved his business to the next county over. Apex Auto lost half its traffic inside 6 months, and when its manager, a decent enough man named Dale Furman, drove over with his resume in his hand, Della read it, looked him in the eye, and hired him on the spot. You're a good mechanic, she said. That's the only thing that's ever mattered around here. Addie left for school that August in her daddy's old truck and cried for the first half hour and then turned on the radio. By her second year, she'd built a ground-up restoration in tribute to her father and named it the Marcus. Ridgeback auctioned it for charity, and every dollar went into the trust. 3 kids out of 2 haulers nobody could find on a map got the first scholarships. Quincy came up from Texas just to see the new shop and stood in the doorway and shook his head and laughed and said, "All right, Vaughn, all right." Dion grew up underfoot in that garage with a wrench in his hand, the way Addie had, and Gus came through 4 or 5 times a year and ate Della's biscuits at sunrise. And the boys at the shop took to calling him Uncle Gus, and he answered to it every single time. Mama always said, "You can't run a debt up on the Lord. He pays you back with an interest you never asked for." Addie used to roll her eyes at that. She doesn't anymore. And 1 year to the day, after that ice storm, late on a Thursday night, with another freeze coming up the valley, Addie was alone in the bay closing up when there came a soft knock at the side door. A young woman stood in it, soaked through, mascara run down her face, pushing a little dead hatchback by hand with a baby seat in the back. "Somebody at the gas station said this is the place that helps folks who can't pay," she said, and her voice cracked clean in half. "I just need to get my daughter home." Addie didn't blink. "Come on in out of that cold. My mama's still up. She'll get you a coffee." There was a fouled fuel line and a dead plug. A 20-minute fix. She worked it in the quiet, the way her daddy used to. The way she had on a different freezing night a year before. When it was running clean, the young woman held out a crumpled $5 bill in a shaking hand. "It's everything I've got." Addie looked at it, then at her. "20 for the labor," she said, and she smiled her father's exact smile. "And the coffee my mother made you." "I don't have 20. Then nothing tonight. Just do one thing for me. One day, somebody who doesn't owe you a single thing is going to be broke down in the cold. And when that day comes, you stop. That's the only bill I'm sending." The young woman covered her mouth and cried, and then she buckled her baby in and pulled out into the dark. Addie locked up and stopped, the way she did every night now, in front of the glass at the door. Her daddy's bench. The chipped mug. The soft old calendar from a man who'd been good to him once. The gold patch in its frame. She laid her hand flat on the cold glass. "I see it now, Daddy," she said. Outside, up Route 9, came the rumble of one engine. Slowing. Gust. Just passing through on his way north to a rally the way he did. The big man rolled to a stop and put down his window. "You good, kid?" "I'm good, Uncle Gus." He nodded slow and lifted 2 fingers off the bars in something like a salute and rode on into the dark. 14 years ago, a man fixed a stranger's engine in the heat and wouldn't take a dime. 14 years later, his daughter did the very same thing for the very same man and never knew it. And 1 year after that, on a cold night, a young mother drove home with a sleeping baby and a debt she could only ever pay forward. That's how it moves. That's how it has always moved. They'll tell you the world's gone cold and mean. They'll tell you nobody stops on the side of the road anymore, that a woman like Addie Vaughn shouldn't have to rebuild a dead engine at 2 in the morning just for a shot at the life she earned. And maybe they're right about some of it. I shared this one because I needed it too, if you want to know the truth. The world keeps telling us to expect the worst out of strangers, and people like Addie keep on quietly proving the world wrong. So now, I want to hear from you. Be honest, standing in that cold bay with a tax sale 45 days out and a child down the hall, would you have folded that $500 right back into the old man's hand the way she did, or would you have taken it? There's no wrong answer, and I'm reading every single one. I keep coming back to the moment Addie Vaughn folded that $500 right back in the Gus renter's shaking hand. 45 days from losing the shop. A child asleep down the hall who had nobody else in the world, and she gave the money back anyway. People hear that and call her a saint, but I don't think that's it at all. I think she just understood something most of us spend a whole lifetime trying to learn, that who you are when no one is keeping score is the only version of you that's actually real. Look at how it all moved, link by link. Marcus Vaughn stopped on a highway 14 years before any of this and fixed a stranger's engine for nothing. And that one quiet decision sat in the world like a seed under snow. It didn't pay off the next day. It didn't pay off the next day. It didn't pay off for over a decade. But it came back. threw his daughter on the coldest night of the year, because a choice like that always finds its way home eventually. Cause and effect doesn't keep a calendar. It just keeps a ledger, and it always settles up. And here's what I want you to really sit with. Addie didn't fix that bike because she's a soft touch. She fixed it because she could, because she'd spent years with grease under her nails, getting good enough at a hard craft to turn a part out of scrap by lantern light, while every part store in the county sat iced shut. A kind heart with no skill behind it is just a nice feeling. A kind heart with trained hands behind it can rewrite somebody's whole life. She had both, and that was the whole difference. The third thing is the one nobody claps for. She didn't quit. 2 winters of running a dyeing shop, slipping cash into her mother Della's church envelope, towing Rex at midnight for $40 so a little boy could keep his inhaler. All of it, while the future she actually wanted sat folded in a drawer, expiring. Most folks would have sold out to Royce Tillman and called it being practical. Addie just kept getting up at 5:15 and doing the next hard thing. That kind of stubbornness isn't pretty. It's the only reason she was still standing in that bay the night Gus rolled in out of the ice. So when somebody asks me what this story is really about, I don't say bikers or money or a lucky break. I say it's about 3 things you can start building in yourself today. Do right even when it costs you. Get good enough at something that your decency actually has teeth, and refuse to lay down when laying down would be so much easier. Marcus planted it. Addie carried it. And somewhere out there tonight, a young mother is driving home holding the next link.